My father's will divided us, but his final letter united the family he left behind. When my father passed, his will didn't just split assets, it split hearts. Arguments turned into battles, and the home that once held laughter became a courtroom of resentment. Weeks later, the lawyer found an unopened letter from him, meant to be read after the will. It wasn't about money. It was about regret, forgiveness, and love he never knew how to express. Reading it, we cried, together, for the first time in years. Hear this. They say you never truly know someone until the reading of their will. I used to think that was cynical. Now I know it's just honest. My father spent his whole life building an empire of silence around himself, brick by brick, year by year, until none of us could reach him anymore. We thought his death would be the end of that silence. We were wrong. Because even from the grave, my father had one final lesson to teach us about love, about family, and about how easily both can be destroyed by a single piece of paper. This is the story of how an inheritance tore 3 siblings apart, and how a dead man's words almost came too late to put us back together. Welcome to my Reddit diaries, where every story reveals the unseen battles within families. Don't forget to subscribe, and tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? Rain drummed against the church windows the day we buried our father. Not the gentle kind that whispers against glass, but the angry kind that demands to be heard. I sat in the third pew, watching water streak down the stained glass saints, and thought about how fitting it was. Even the weather was crying harder than any of us could. My older brother Marcus sat 2 pews ahead, shoulders rigid, hands clasped so tight his knuckles had gone white. He hadn't looked at me once since I'd arrived. To my right, 3 rows back, my sister Elena stared at the closed casket with eyes that had run out of tears days ago. We were a family of 3, mourning alone in the same room. That should have told me everything about what was coming. The priest spoke about my father like he'd known him. He hadn't. Nobody really had. Robert Chen, self-made businessman, pillar of the community, devoted father. The words felt hollow, like reading a resume instead of a eulogy. But what else was there to say? That he built a successful company but forgot to build relationships with his own children? That he provided everything except the one thing we actually needed? After the service, we stood under a black umbrella at the graveside. Marcus on one end, me in the middle, Elena on the other. 3 points of a broken triangle. The funeral director handed Marcus a rose to place on the casket. He did it mechanically, like checking off a task. Then me. Then Elena. She held hers for a long moment before letting it drop, and I wondered if she was thinking the same thing I was. That we were burying a stranger who happened to share our last name. We didn't speak on the way to our cars. We didn't make plans to meet. We just left. I flew back home the next day. Back to my classroom, my apartment, my carefully constructed life 2 states away from everything I'd grown up with. I thought that was the end of it. A sad funeral, a distant memory, a chapter finally closed on a relationship that never really existed in the first place. 1 week later, the lawyer called. His name was Gerald Chin, no relation, and his office smelled like old paper and furniture polish. The kind of place that dealt in wills and estates and the messy aftermath of death. Marcus arrived first, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. He nodded at me. I nodded back. We sat in separate chairs and pretended to read magazines we weren't actually seeing. Elena came in last, looking smaller than I remembered. She'd lost weight. Her hair was pulled back in a hasty ponytail, and there were shadows under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. She took the chair farthest from both of us. The lawyer cleared his throat. Thank you all for coming. I know this is a difficult time. Your father's estate is substantial, and he was very specific about his wishes. He opened a folder. Started reading. Legal language that meant nothing until it meant everything. 60% of the estate, including the family business, to Marcus Chin. 30% to Daniel Chin. 10% to Elena Chin. The numbers hung in the air like accusation. I watched Elena's face go pale. Watched her fingers dig into the armrests. Watched something behind her eyes just break. I'm sorry, the lawyer said, though he didn't sound sorry. Those were your father's express wishes. There must be a mistake. Elena's voice came out barely above a whisper. I was there. Every hospital visit. Every doctor's appointment. Every sleepless night for 3 years while his health failed. I gave up everything. My career. My relationship. My life. Marcus finally looked at her. The business needs someone who understands it. I've worked there for 20 years. It makes sense. Sense. Elena stood up so fast her chair scraped against the floor. I put my life on hold. I moved back home. I was there when neither of you bothered to visit. And I'm worth 10%. Elena. I started to stand, but she held up a hand. Don't. Just don't, Daniel. You left when you were 18 and never looked back. At least you were honest about not caring. But youth. She turned to Marcus. You think 20 years of working for him means more than 3 years of caring for him? I didn't say that. You didn't have to. He said it for you. 60%. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. The golden child gets the kingdom. The dutiful daughter gets scraps. And the runaway gets rewarded for abandoning us all. That's not fair, I said. Fair? You want to talk about fair? She grabbed her purse. I'll tell you what's not fair. Watching him die slowly, one day at a time, holding his hand through every moment of pain, and having him tell me even in death that it didn't matter. That I didn't matter. She walked out. The door closed behind her with a soft click that felt louder than a slam. The lawyer shifted uncomfortably. There are papers to sign. Details to work out. Perhaps we should reschedule. Marcus shook his head. We can do it now. Marcus, maybe we should talk to her first. There's nothing to talk about. The will is clear. Dad knew what he was doing. Did he? I wanted to ask. Did he know he was driving a wedge between the only family he had left? Did he care? But I didn't say it. I signed the papers. Took my copy. Left Marcus sitting there alone with his inheritance and his certainty. I tried calling Elena that night. She didn't answer. Sent texts. Nothing. For 3 days she went dark. When she finally responded, it was a single message. Don't contact me about the estate. Get a lawyer if you need to reach me. The family home became a battlefield. We had to divide decades of possessions, decide who got what from a lifetime of accumulated things. Each visit was worse than the last. Marcus wanted the dining table. Elena said it was the only place she'd felt close to Mom, who died when we were young. They argued for 40 minutes over a piece of furniture neither of them would probably use. I tried to be the peacemaker. Tried to suggest compromises. But every suggestion felt like taking sides, and every silence felt like betrayal. He never loved me, Elena said one day, standing in the middle of the living room, surrounded by boxes. Did he? Be honest. Elena. No. I need to hear it. Because I keep telling myself he did, in his own way. But his own way was leaving me 10%. His own way was valuing me least. So just tell me the truth. Did our father love me? I didn't know how to answer that. How do you measure love in percentages? How do you tell your sister that you don't know if your father was capable of love at all? Marcus walked in then. Looked at both of us. Are we really doing this? Fighting over what he thought? He's dead. The will is what it is. Accept it and move on. Easy for you to say, Elena shot back. You got everything you wanted. I got everything I earned. You got everything he thought you earned. There's a difference. You want to know the difference? Marcus's voice rose. The difference is I stayed. I built something. I didn't run away like Daniel, and I didn't just sit around playing nurse expecting a reward. The words hit Elena like a physical blow. I saw her face crumble, then harden into something cold and distant. Get out, she said quietly. This is my house too. I said get out. Both of you. I'm done. With this house, with this family, with pretending any of this meant something. Take your 60%, Marcus. Take your 30, Daniel. I'll take my 10 and the knowledge that I was right all along. We're not a family. We're just strangers who happen to share DNA and a dead father who couldn't love any of us the way we needed. She walked upstairs. A door slammed. Marcus and I stood there in the wreckage of everything we'd never been. She'll calm down, Marcus said. But I knew better. I'd seen that look before. In the mirror, the day I left home at 18. It was the look of someone cutting ties, burning bridges, choosing survival over connection. We were falling apart. The inheritance hadn't divided assets. It had divided hearts. I left the house that day thinking it was over. That we'd become what so many families become after death. Distant memories and awkward holiday cards. 3 separate lives that used to orbit the same sun. I was walking to my car when my phone buzzed. Gerald Chin, the lawyer. I almost didn't answer. Mr. Chin? Daniel Chin? Yes. Something's been found. In your father's safe deposit box. Another document. He paused. You all need to come back. There's more your father wanted to say. My hands tightened on the phone. What kind of document? A letter. With specific instructions that it only be opened after the will was read and time had passed. He was very clear about the timing. I stood there in the driveway of my childhood home, rain starting to fall again, and felt something shift. Dread. I couldn't tell which. When? I asked. As soon as possible. All 3 of you. Together. I looked back at the house. At the windows where we used to watch for our father to come home from work. At the door we'd walked through thousands of times as children, when we still believed families stayed together. I'll call them, I said. But I didn't know if they'd come. I didn't know if we could sit in the same room again without destroying what little remained. And I didn't know if I wanted to hear what else my father had to say from beyond the grave. Because sometimes the dead should stay silent. And sometimes they speak too late to matter. But I was about to learn that sometimes, just sometimes, words written in the shadow of death can carry more truth than a lifetime of silence ever did. I just didn't know yet whether that truth would save us or finish what the will had started. Getting them both to come back was harder than I expected. Marcus answered on the first ring but said he had meetings all week. Elena didn't answer at all. I left a voicemail. Sent a text. Finally wrote an email with the subject line, "Dad left something else." She responded 3 hours later with a single word. 2 days later, we were back in Gerald Chen's office. The same chairs. The same smell of old paper and regret. But this time, there was something else on the desk between us. A manila envelope, yellowed at the edges, sealed with red wax. My father's handwriting across the front in black ink. To be opened only after the will is read. Do not open before. For my children, when they need to hear me most. We stared at it like it might explode. The lawyer cleared his throat. Your father deposited this with specific instructions. It was to remain sealed until at least 2 weeks after the will reading. He was very particular about that timing. Why? Marcus asked. He didn't say. Only that you would understand when you read it. Elena's voice was flat. What if we don't want to read it? What if we're done hearing from him? That's your choice, of course. But he did ask that if you chose to open it, you do so together. Of course he did, I said quietly. One last demand from beyond the grave. We sat there in silence. 3 people who used to be siblings, staring at a dead man's words we weren't sure we could survive hearing. Marcus reached for it first. We came all this way. Wait. Elena's hand shot out, stopping him. What if it's worse? What if there's something in there that makes this all more painful? How could it possibly be worse than what he's already done? Marcus pulled his hand back. But she's right. We should decide together. All of us. They both looked at me. The middle child. The one who left. The one who somehow always ended up deciding things by default. We read it, I said. Because not knowing will eat us alive. And because maybe, just maybe, there's something in there we need to hear. Marcus nodded. Elena closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them. Together then. All 3 of us. No one reads ahead. No one leaves the room. The lawyer handed Marcus the envelope. He broke the seal. Inside were 7 pages of lined paper, covered in our father's careful handwriting. The same handwriting that used to sign our report cards. The same handwriting on birthday cards that always just said, "Love, Dad," like he couldn't think of anything else to write. Marcus unfolded the pages. Started to read aloud. His voice shook on the first words. Marcus, Elena, Daniel. If you're reading this, I'm gone. And if the lawyer followed my instructions, you've already read the will. You're probably angry. Maybe at me. Maybe at each other. That's all right. I expected it. Elena made a sound halfway between a laugh and a sob. The will wasn't fair. I know that. But I need you to understand. It was never about fairness. It was about forcing you to talk to each other. To fight, yes, but then to sit down and figure it out together. Because that's what I never taught you to do. Marcus's hands tightened on the paper. Marcus. I gave you the business not because you earned it more, but because I trapped you in it. I'm sorry. I was a coward who couldn't admit my own mistakes cost you your dreams. The business is yours to run or to sell. Your choice now. Not mine. You're free. Marcus stopped reading. His jaw worked, but no sound came out. I watched something break open in his face, something he'd been holding closed for years. Keep going, Elena whispered. Elena. I gave you the least because I knew you'd be furious enough to finally say what you've swallowed for years. You were always the strongest. I leaned on that. I used it. And I never thanked you. That 10% isn't your value. It's my shame, written in numbers. Elena's breath caught. Tears started sliding down her face, silent and unstoppable. Daniel, you got 30% of something you didn't ask for because I know you'll do the right thing with it. You always had the clearest conscience. Probably because you left. I was angry at you for years. Then I became proud. You chose yourself. I never could. I felt something lodge in my throat. All this time, I thought he hated me for leaving. All this time. You 3 haven't been siblings in years. You've been strangers sharing a bloodline. I did that. My silence. My coldness. My inability to say I love you without choking on the words. The money doesn't matter. Split it evenly. Burn it. I don't care. What matters is this. You still have each other. Don't waste that the way I wasted you. Marcus's voice had dropped to barely a whisper, but he kept reading. I was a terrible father. But you 3, you can still be a family. I love you. I should have said it more. The last word hung in the air. We sat there, the 3 of us, breathing in the same space for the first time in years. Really breathing. Really present. He knew, Marcus said finally. He knew exactly what he was doing. The whole time, I added. The unfair split. The timing. He wanted us to fight first. To feel it. He said I was the strongest. Elena's voice broke on the last word. He thought I was strong. You are, Marcus said, and it was the first kind thing I'd heard him say to her in weeks. You were always the strongest. I think that's why I resented you. What? Because you stayed. You did the hard thing. And I convinced myself it was duty or obligation, but really, it was love. You loved him even when he made it impossible. Marcus set the letter down carefully, like it might disintegrate. I need to tell you both something. About the last time I saw him. Elena wiped her eyes. What do you mean? 2 weeks before he died. He was lucid, really lucid, for the first time in days. He grabbed my hand. He told me about the letter. He asked me not to tell you until after you'd both felt the anger. He said you needed to feel it first or you wouldn't understand why he was sorry. You knew. I stared at him. This whole time, you knew there was a letter? He made me promise. He asked me if I wanted him to change the will, make it equal. I said no. Why? Elena's voice was sharp again. Because I believed him. He said if we could survive the fighting, if we could come back together after being torn apart, then we'd actually be family. Not just people who shared a last name. And I wanted to know. I wanted to know if we could survive it. If there was anything real left between us. The office went silent except for the ticking of a wall clock. I looked at Marcus, really looked at him, and saw someone I'd stopped seeing years ago. Someone who carried his own weight. His own pain. Were you going to keep the 60%? I asked. If there hadn't been a letter? He met my eyes. I don't know. Probably. Because I've spent 20 years telling myself I deserved it. That I earned it by giving up everything else. He turned to Elena. But you were right. What you said at the house. I got everything I wanted, and it feels like nothing. What are you saying? Elena asked. I'm saying I want to sell the business. I'm saying I'm 38 years old and I've never done a single thing I actually wanted to do. I'm saying Dad was right. He didn't give me an inheritance. He gave me permission to walk away. To do what? I asked. Architecture. I got accepted to a program in Europe 20 years ago. I turned it down because he needed me in the business. Maybe it's too late. Maybe I'm too old. But I'm going to find out. Elena was staring at him. You wanted to be an architect? I wanted a lot of things. I just forgot how to want them. She laughed, soft and sad. I have a confession too. I've been accepted to a graduate program. Psychology. I applied in secret 6 months ago. I'm supposed to start in the fall. You're leaving? I asked. I'm choosing me. Finally. After 30 years of choosing everyone else. We sat there, 3 broken people holding pieces of a truth we'd never been able to speak before. And I realized our father's letter hadn't just given us permission to grieve. It had given us permission to live. He was a bad father, Elena said quietly. But maybe we can be good siblings. Maybe, Marcus agreed. If we're willing to try. They both looked at me. And I knew what I had to say. What I'd been avoiding saying. I've been divorced for 2 years. I didn't tell either of you because I didn't think you'd care. I didn't think I was part of this family anymore. Daniel. Elena's voice cracked. But I want to be. I want to be your brother again. Not the one who left. Not the guilty one. Just your brother. For the first time in years, Elena reached across the space between us and took my hand. Then she reached for Marcus. And he reached for me. 3 points of a triangle, connected again. The lawyer had left the room at some point. We hadn't noticed. We were too busy rebuilding something we thought was too broken to fix. Outside the window, rain had started falling again. But this time, it sounded different. Like washing clean instead of washing away. We spent that night at the family home. Not arguing over furniture or dividing possessions. Just talking. Really talking, for the first time since we were kids who still believed families stayed together forever. Marcus sat in Dad's old chair, the leather one he used to fall asleep in after long days at the office. I called the program, he said around midnight. The architecture school in Copenhagen. They still have my application on file. They said if I'm serious, they'll consider me for next year's intake. Are you serious? Elena asked. Terrified. But yes. I'm 40 next year. If not now, then when? He looked at the business documents spread across the coffee table. I've already got interest from 2 buyers. Good ones. People who'll take care of the employees. Dad would hate that, I said. Dad's not here. And maybe that's the point. We get to choose now. What we keep. What we let go. Elena pulled her knees up to her chest, something she used to do when we were young and staying up too late. The program I got into is in Boston. Clinical psychology. I want to work with caregivers. People who sacrifice everything for family members with chronic illness. I want to help them remember they matter too. That's perfect, I told her. That's exactly what you should do. I'm scared, she admitted. I'm 29. Most of the other students will be fresh out of undergrad. And I haven't been in school in years. You'll be amazing, Marcus said. You've always been the smart one. She smiled, small but real. You're just saying that because you feel guilty about the 60%. I'm saying it because it's true. And yes, I feel guilty. Which is why we're splitting everything evenly. Exactly like the letter said. We spent the next 2 hours working out the details. Not fighting. Not keeping score. Just 3 people trying to do right by each other for the first time in our lives. What about this place? Elena gestured at the house around us. Do we sell it? Marcus and I exchanged looks. No, I said. Not as a museum. But as a place to come back to. A place to remember we're still family. Monthly dinners, Marcus suggested. First Sunday of every month. No excuses unless it's a real emergency. I'm in Boston, Elena pointed out. So we take turns. Boston 1 month. Here the next. Wherever Daniel is the month after. I'm 2 states away. Then we travel. That's what families do, right? They make the effort. Elena's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they looked different. Lighter. First Sunday. All of us. No matter what. We shook on it. 3 hands stacked in the middle, like making a pact. Like being kids again, before everything got complicated. The next day, we set up a foundation in our father's name. Not a monument to who he was, but to who we wished he'd been. Scholarships for kids who lost parents young. Support groups for grieving families. Resources for children growing up in emotional silence. He'd probably hate this too, Marcus said as we signed the paperwork. Good, Elena replied. Then we're doing something right. 6 months passed. 6 months of phone calls that lasted longer than 5 minutes. 6 months of texts that weren't just logistics. 6 months of actually showing up. Marcus sent photos from Copenhagen. Him in a studio surrounded by blueprints and models. Him sketching buildings that would never exist except in his imagination. He looked younger somehow. Lighter. Elena sent updates from Boston. Her first week of classes. Her first client at her practicum. A photo of her at a coffee shop with new friends, laughing at something off camera. She'd cut her hair. Started wearing colors instead of just black and gray. I told them about my kids. The divorce I'd been hiding. The guilt I carried about failing at marriage the same way I'd failed at being a son. They listened. They didn't judge. They just listened. And on the first Sunday of every month, we kept our promise. Sometimes in Boston. Sometimes at the family home. Once in my cramped apartment where we ate takeout on paper plates because I didn't own enough dishes. It wasn't perfect. We still argued. Still fell into old patterns sometimes. Marcus still got defensive when he felt criticized. Elena still shut down when she felt overlooked. I still tried to fix everything instead of just being present. But we were trying. And trying was more than we'd done in 20 years. The first Sunday in December, we met at the family home. Snow was falling outside, covering everything in white. Marcus had flown in from Denmark. Elena drove up from Boston. I brought my 2 kids, Sophie and James, ages 8 and 6. Their first time meeting their aunt and uncle. You never told us you had an aunt and uncle, Sophie said accusingly as we pulled up. I know, sweetheart. That's something Daddy is trying to fix. Inside, Elena had set the table. Marcus was in the kitchen attempting to cook something that smelled dangerous. My kids stared at these strangers who were supposed to be family. I'm your Aunt Elena, she said, kneeling down to their level. And I'm very sorry I haven't been around. But I'm here now and I plan to stay. Sophie, always the bolder one, hugged her immediately. James held back, suspicious. Marcus came out of the kitchen, apron covered in flour, and James's eyes went wide. You're tall, he said. You're short, Marcus replied. Want to help me mess up dinner? By the end of the night, Sophie was showing Elena her drawings. James was helping Marcus build something with blocks. And I sat back and watched my family exist in the same space without bloodshed. Small miracles. After the kids went to sleep in the upstairs bedrooms, the 3 of us sat in the living room. The Christmas tree Marcus had insisted on putting up glowed in the corner. Ornaments from our childhood hung on branches, things we'd almost thrown away during the estate division. We should add a 4th chair, Elena said, looking at our setup around the coffee table. For who? Marcus asked. For him. Not because he deserves it, but because he's why we're here. We found an old chair from the dining room. Set it slightly apart from our circle. Empty, but acknowledged. Marcus raised his glass. To Dad, who was a terrible father but accidentally taught us something valuable. What's that? I asked. That we get to choose our legacy. We don't have to repeat his mistakes. We toasted, drank, sat in comfortable silence. I'm proud of us, Elena said quietly. For not giving up. For doing the hard work. Me too, I agreed. Marcus stood, walked to the mantel, picked up an old photo. The 4 of us from 20 years ago. Dad's hand awkwardly on my shoulder. Everyone's smile slightly forced. He set it back down next to a new photo from tonight. The three of us with my kids, arms around each other, genuinely smiling. That's the difference, he said. Old family and new family. The one we were given and the one we chose to build. I looked at my brother and sister. At the people they'd become. At the people we were all still becoming. My father's will divided us. That was the point. Because sometimes you have to break something completely before you can rebuild it the right way. He was cruel. He was cold. He was a man who loved us but didn't know how to show it until he was out of time. But that letter was the father we needed him to be. Not perfect. Not redeemed. Just honest. We'll never get back the years we lost fighting. But we have the years ahead to be the family he couldn't give us. And maybe that's the real inheritance. Not the money. Not the house. But the choice to do better than the people who raised us. They say blood is thicker than water. But I learned something. Love is thicker than silence. And forgiveness? Forgiveness is the hardest inheritance to accept. But it's the one worth keeping. 3 months ago, Marcus finished his first architectural design. A community center for grieving families. He dedicated it to our mother. Elena graduated top of her class and opened a practice specializing in caregiver trauma. She named it after the strength our father said she had but never acknowledged while he was alive. And me? I'm learning to be present. To show up. To tell my kids I love them every single day, in words they can hear, in ways they can feel. We're not perfect. We're still broken in places. Still healing from wounds that go deeper than a will or a letter can fix. But we're family. The real kind. The chosen kind. The kind that shows up on first Sundays and stays. If this story touched you, if it reminded you of your own family, your own struggles with forgiveness and legacy, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button. Leave a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. Share this with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to rebuild what's broken. And if you're estranged from family, if you're carrying pain that feels too heavy to heal, remember this. We get to choose our legacy. We get to decide what we carry forward and what we leave behind. Sometimes the dead speak too late. But sometimes, if we're brave enough to listen, their words can still light the way home.